Welcome, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce you to the final webinar in the Essential Skills to Build Your Business series, hosted by Manitoba Agriculture and WeMB, the Manitoba Women's Enterprise Center. Today's topic is crafting your elevator pitch and making crucial connections with Cate Friesen. My name is Annette Allen. I am a business development specialist with the value-added branch of Manitoba Agriculture. I will start today's webinar with our land acknowledgement. We recognize that Manitoba is on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Oyate, Denesalun, and Nehethawak peoples. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge Northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. It is my pleasure to introduce Cate Friesen today. Cate Friesen, the force behind the Story Source, is a story strategist, facilitator, trainer, and keynote presenter who brings together over 30 years of experience as an entrepreneur, award-winning CBC producer, documentary maker, and performer. Her signature Power of Story and Power of the Pitch workshops have been presented to Prairies Can, Manitoba and Alberta, WeMB, Community Futures, Canadian Community Economic Development Network, and the Asper School of Business, among others. Reported results include increased success in funding applications, increased business opportunities, more effective presentations, better community connections, and more fruitful media interviews. In her practice, Cate Friesen draws on the work of Marshall Gans of the Harvard Kennedy School, Jennifer Acker from the Stanford School of Business, and other thought leaders working in narrative for organizational and systems change. She combines this strong theoretical base with extensive experience and certified facilitation skills that leverage the strengths and perspectives of any given group she works with. Cate will be fielding questions after her presentation, so please, if you have questions, use the Q&A function and we will get to them after the presentation. We're pleased to have you joining us today, Cate. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And I am really happy and excited to be here with all of you today. And I want to begin by acknowledging that as an entrepreneur, I know that it's challenging. It's as challenging as it is rewarding. And being in the food business, which many of you are, has its own unique set of challenges. I spoke to a number of people who are in food businesses here in Manitoba, and one of them, Mary McLean, owner of Happy Dance Hummus, said to me, being in the food business is not for cowards. It's hard work. The profit margins are not always huge, and earning trust is crucial. Your customers are eating your product, she reminded me. They need it to taste good and to be safe. All of these women acknowledge that the everyday work of making connections, growing relationships, communicating your value, and earning trust is key, and it's totally worth it. So I hope that I can offer you something today that is totally worth your time. And you might be thinking, oh yeah, but what if it's not my style? I would say that whether you call yourself an extrovert or introvert, whether you love big networking events or even the stage, or you would rather be behind a table at a market or behind a computer, making connections can be done your way. So I invite you all to think about how you might do this in a way that feels like it's you. So, and I encourage you as we're going through to think about your questions and the challenges that you might have when I present this material. So I'm going to begin by sharing, which is always a challenge for me. Let's make sure that I can get that right. Awesome. I did it. elevate your pitch, and make crucial connections. So the first thing I want to remind you or set the scene for is that pitching and connection are ultimately the same. We often think of pitching as very formal. You might be thinking Dragon's Den, or like a really slick slide deck. But in essence, the role of the pitch and connection is the same. It's relational before it's transactional. And that's something that I noticed with all the sessions that came before mine. When Jessica talked about communicating, when Joanne talked about negotiation, when Hannah talked about building a thriving brand, and also when Jeff talked about building relationships to get into retail. It's all about relations. And for me, that makes it a little easier. It's less about sales. It has to connect who you are with the values that your company offers. It's not one size fits all. So it really depends on who you're talking to and what the context is. And we're going to go through a number of those. And the other one that I like to think of, it's more ping pong than fastball. So maybe I should have said, just to keep up the baseball analogy, that in a pitch, it's more, like you're just casually throwing the ball back and forth than it is fastball, which means that it's conversational. And ultimately not about being perfect, but about listening and responding. So here's how we're going to tackle that today. And my goal is to make it, like I said, as relevant for you as possible. So we're going to start with the most essential thing, which is communicating your value. And we're going to use 2 tools to help you articulate that. That's a big chunk of this. And then we'll look at elevating your pitch, using that information and looking at some essential pitch elements and some good examples. And then we'll wind it up with making crucial connections. So gaining tips for networking and growing your entrepreneurial ecosystem. Okay, I'm going to just remind you that you can either open up your workbooks, that you should have your pitch worksheet perhaps nearby, though all the prompts will be in these slides. But also that it's a really good idea just to have paper and pen nearby and jot down a few questions. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to jot down actually is think about who you want to connect with in order to grow your business or launch your business or get it to that next step. Is it a particular customer base or group, an investor, a retailer, a potential business partner, a mentor? Write down everything that comes to mind right now and keep that list in view during this session. You can also start with a business goal and then figure out who would be the best person to talk to. So let's begin. Working from your why. So Jennifer Acker from the Stanford School of Business has done a lot of research on how meaning and purpose shape our decisions by communicating the meaning behind your business, your why, and the passion that drives your work. You can move others to buy from you, to hire you, invest in you, or follow you on Instagram. When you really want to connect, you need to let people know what makes you tick, what you value, and what you bring to the work that's uniquely yours. People don't connect with the business, they connect with the person. So that's you. But here's the thing, all our lives, we've been asked what we want to do, or what, when we're young, it's like, what do you want to do or be when you grow up? And later on now, when we meet somebody new, the first question we ask is, what do you do? And when we respond with a title, we often get a particular reaction, or it's not necessarily a good opener to conversation. So if I say, oh, I'm a consultant, and you think I don't really care about consultants, you may not be that interested in talking to me further. Or if you're a farmer and you're running a small mill producing gluten-free oats, and the person you're talking to doesn't like oatmeal in the morning, you might lose a bit of attention. But if you start with why you do what you do, you've increased your chances of building a genuine connection, sparking curiosity, building trust, and getting past those assumptions. So here's how it works. I'm going to start an introduction from our why, and then move to the how and what. And yes, this is definitely inspired by Simon Sinek. And if you want to hear his great video, it has millions of views, I think, on working from the why. You can look it up on YouTube. This is my version. When I started my business 8 years ago, and I called it, the business is called The Story Source. I was just coming off of about 12 years at CBC. And whenever I introduced myself, people either thought, because of my CBC experience, that I was gonna be in marketing and communications, or else I was gonna be a storyteller. So I spent a lot of time in my initial introductions with people, telling them what I wasn't. No, I'm not going to tell your story for you. Long-winded explanations. And instead of moving to what was really interesting, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I'm doing it like nobody else. So here's a very short elevator pitch that I crafted that starts with the why. I am passionate about connection. And I believe that when we connect, we can make bigger things happen together. And I know from my experience that story is an incredibly strong way to connect. But I am not going to tell your story for you. I will work with you to discover and tell the stories you need to tell to share your vision and inspire action, to make the change you want to see. I bring together all my skills as a songwriter and performer, an entrepreneur, a journalist, even as far back as occupational therapy, to make this happen. I'm a story strategist. Sometimes I call myself a story doula, depending on what day you're talking to me. But really, I'm a coach, a trainer, and a consultant. And that brings me here to the room with you. So that's what we're going to start with, breaking that down for yourself. I hope you can grab that pen or make some notes. So starting with the why. Next to the what, I think the why is probably the easiest thing for us to get a hold of and express for ourselves. So here are some really great prompts. I believe. I am passionate about, like I'm passionate about connection. Or what gets me up every morning. I know we're not going to have a lot of time here to for you to write this down and brainstorm, but I invite you to jot down a few ideas while I give you some examples. So I've met egg farmers, nutritionists, and real estate agents who were passionate about their family and chose their careers to work with family. I've met engineers and food producers who love to create something new that makes life easier for others. Some who are driven by environmental concerns. So what is your heart telling you? Lourdes is not a food producer, but she's a farmer. And I'm going to throw in this example among the others because she actually embodies this so much. So Lourdes's why is to inspire people to find joy in their life. And she does that through a flower farm, through starting a studio with natural dyeing. And in everything she does, she pulls on that why. You can check out either the article of her in Chatelaine or go to Masagana Flower Farm just to see how she really pulls people in with her why. The how. This is the one that we often get stuck on. The way you do your what. I don't know about you, but the first time that I had somebody ask me what my unique sales proposition was, my mouth dropped open and I didn't know what to say. But really, here are some great questions that help you figure out what your unique value proposition is, your unique sales proposition, whatever way you want to look at it. I like the word value. Why would someone seek you out instead of someone else? What problems do you solve? What unique combinations of skills, training, and experience do you bring together to express your why? So thinking back to how I talked about my how, you can see that I've answered some of those questions. I want to tell you, though, about Amy Nicol and the big question for her: what problems do you solve? Amy Nicol is the Chief Operating Officer and founder of Adagio Acres. And she She's a producer of Naked Oats. You might have seen her oats in retail stores, certainly, and in Manitoba. And she's chosen very deliberately to stay within Manitoba. She called it scaling deep. When she started out, she had a problem to solve. She couldn't find a mill that would work with the size of her crops because she's a small farmer, small batch. So she started one of her own. She had no background in milling, but she had a lot of determination. She had to learn to weld. I mean, I have a lot of admiration for this. So here's this problem that she was trying to solve. And then as she reached out to other farmers, when she was looking for other mills, she found that this was a problem that a lot of small farmers had. Here's what she said. Food that was wonderfully nutritious, organically grown, and lovingly tended couldn't make it to the conventional market because of logistics. That's when she decided to create a grain CSA, community supported agriculture, where she milled the leftovers from other farmers because again, those small batches can't be sent to the bigger mills. And they pooled them all, and then I, as a customer, could buy a CSA. When I spoke with Amy, and I did a podcast with her a number of years ago, I thought she was so amazing within her conversation, expressing her why, her how, and her what. I don't think of our farm as a food business. It's as a business primarily giving people calories. I like to think of it as a whole experience. We are collecting and gathering food from around the province that has a story to tell and drawing people into the story. That's what our grain CSA is all about. I'm a farmer. So if she starts with I'm a farmer or just stays with I'm a farmer, you don't know what differentiates her from all the other farmers, but now you do. Those questions, those how questions, keep coming back to them, and the why ones as well. It's been 8 years since I've started using this. And as my business grows and changes, or when I need to find that grounding about why I'm doing what I'm doing, I go on it. Identify keywords that stand out for you in your why and how. Practice introducing yourself, adding some of these values and phrases. So you don't necessarily have to start with I'm passionate about, but you could pull that in maybe by the second sentence. Start with trusted friends and colleagues, and then increase the stakes. And now incorporate your why and how into your elevator pitch. So that's the first way of actually pulling together your value, expressing your value with an elevator pitch. I'm going to briefly touch on one more. And this is a storytelling skill, which is take me to a time and place. And really, it's about remembering those places in your business where you feel the most alive. When you feel you forget about the time, you're in the moment, you're in the zone. You feel that spark of your idea matching the problem or challenge in front of you when you didn't want to be anywhere else. This is kind of like coming in the side door on your value proposition. So I talked to Katie McInnes, and her husband Colin, they run Dogs Run Farm near Clearwater, Manitoba. They're doing a lot of pastures, free range, and they have a very small acreage. They're first generation farmers. They raise pork, lamb, chicken, turkey, eggs, and now they also have a herd of cows, which means they just expanded. I asked her about that idea of a moment when she felt completely in the zone, and she immediately talked about the moment of moving the cattle to new pasture. And I took this off her Instagram as she's taking a picture. And she said it's the cows tell her that it's time, it's the movement, it's the sound and the smells. And because she now spends a lot of time behind the computer promoting her business, these are the moments that ground her and tell her why she's doing what she's doing. They are also the moments that she uses to connect with customers, which she does primarily in the newsletter. So it doesn't always have to be in person. So there's some cues that you can take some questions that you can answer to generate moments. We're not going to do that now. But I'll let you know that last night, or I'll confess that last night or early this morning, I woke up and I had a moment of panic about doing this presentation. And I was thinking, how can I, who like just my passion is connection, be at the computer and not see anybody's faces or not know who's really there in the room? And then I thought, yes, I can use moments. Because right when I'm teaching this and when I've taught this in person or even online, and I use these questions and get people to think about the moment in their business when they were just like in exactly the place they wanted to be. It was so powerful. I would hear voices start quietly and then get louder and more animated, and people lean into each other. I heard many different experiences. So I picked that moment right now to remember this is powerful and that I hope, even though we can't see each other, we have some of that connection here. So tips for using this skill. Share your moment with a trusted colleague. Ask them what it says about you. Try out key moments. I collect them around skills, strengths, a moment that you're proud of. This is where you're going to find the clues to what your unique proposition is, what you bring to the world that no one else does through your business. So bank these moments for days when you wondered why you thought your business was such a great idea. That's an important one. And also think about taking them with you when you're making new connections. At the baseline to ground yourself, why am I entering into this big networking event? Because there are things in my business that are really important to me. There's things that I know that I can bring that no one else can. And even if you don't talk about those moments in that event, you're going to carry yourself as though you know exactly why you're there. I'm going to give you one other short elevator pitch form to use. I've been trying this out lately. It's called the wow, how, and now, though I have added the why because I think you can catch people's attention with your why or with a wow moment. So think about one fact about your business, one interesting hook that might grab some attention. So for me, I might actually start with, I'm not going to tell your story for you. And they're like, what? And then how I might go into how I work with people for them to discover and tell a story that only they can tell. So again, just going into how you're solving the problem. And then what I'm working on right now. So this is a really quick way to give people a little bit of a sense of your business and then what you're working on right now. For instance, I'm expanding into a new product line. We just bought a cattle herd. I'm working on a new workshop. I have new clients that work as harbor masters, egg farmers, and are young newcomers. That would be an example for me. So this pitch method was developed by Brian Walter. He's the one who came up with the ping pong, by the way, that pitching is more like ping pong than it is like hardball. And you can look that up online. He's got a pretty funny example. It's a bit cheesy, but it's actually really good. So that's another way to do an elevator pitch. Elevate your pitch. So I promised in the description, I promised in my contract that we would talk about crucial connections and elevating your pitch or crafting your pitch. So I've given you two quick ways so far that you can do an elevator pitch. And really an elevator pitch is about introducing yourself to someone, giving them a little bit of a sense of your business and also the value that you bring. When you go into a longer pitch or have a longer amount of time with people, you also want to think about your audience, who you are helping, and who your business is helping, and emphasize the audience more. So that's one way that it's different. So let's say you have an opportunity to make a formal pitch, and I know a few of you in this room may have that. Or if you're going to sit down, let's say, with a potential distributor or retailer, you can use the pitch worksheet that was sent out yesterday. to follow along for this and to prepare for something like that. Let's start with a definition of pitch that, again, is relational. You are building a connection with your audience so they can engage with you and the bright idea you have. So, and I put audience right at the top because for a longer pitch like this, you actually want to say right from the top, I see you. I see where you have your challenges and what might work for you. So you're setting up to share an idea that could transform their problem into a solution. And then your audience has a choice to buy in, to join you, or to support you. So the first thing is to go back to that list that you had, that you've made, that you might have jotted down at the beginning of the session. And think about what your goals are and who your audience is. The goal could be to get a funder to take the first step in considering investing, or a partner, potential business partner. The goal could be to land a table at a farmer's market or an event where you can sell your product. The goal could be to get people willing to sign up for a CSA. And then definitely the goal could be to sign on a new retailer or your first retailer. For going through the pitch, I want to introduce you to another entrepreneur that I spoke with. Her name is Mary McLean, and she is the owner, founder, CEO of Happy Dance Hummus. They've been in business for 9 years, and you can find their products at many retailers here in Winnipeg, like Save-On, Sobeys, VitaHealth, and markets like Third and Bird. In fact, in 2018, Happy Dance received the Best New Product of the Year, awarded by the Manitoba Food and Beverage Association. And Mary said between Third and Bird that year and that award, it really moved her business into the next level. The mission of Happy Dance Hummus is to make great hummus, to help you get healthy and happy, and to get your feet dancing. And they've just introduced a new product with plans to expand. I'm going to tell you more about that, but we're going to do it through using the elements of the pitch and using Mary's business as an example. So pitch, kind of like that wow moment in the wow how now, often starts with a hook. You want to grab people's attention. Now, I'll let you in on a secret. When I'm working with people on developing their pitch, we often develop all the other elements first and then come back to the hook to see which would be the best hook. But in this case, I'm going to start right at the top. The hook could be a stat. It could be a story, a connection to values that you have with your audience, or a provocative question. Mary was first to admit that if she was in person, the hook was often to offer people a sample of her hummus. When she's on Zoom, the question might be, what do you like to eat? And have you ever considered eating hummus with that? Going back to Amy, she might use a stat and say, did you know that farmers usually need a full semi-load truck, 40,000 pounds, before a grain buyer will even bother looking at it? So if a farmer harvests a small quantity, there's often nowhere for it to go. So it's a bit of a little story. It's got a bit of a stat, and there's a sense of something provocative in it. So you want to start by getting people curious. And then immediately stay with your audience. What's the audience's problem? Okay, I mean, you may not know really what the audience's problem is, but you can do research. You can know what their challenges are. Their challenge, their pain points, the barriers that are getting, getting in the way from them moving to a better spot. In a marketing course that I took, the woman teaching it called it, "What's their island of sad?" And she said, "Get really sad." And I actually loved that because it made me laugh. And at that point, pitches did not make me laugh. They made me nervous. So you can think about what's making your audience sad. So if we look at Mary and the hummus, and let's just say she's at a farmer's market and she's already got somebody to eat the hummus. Um, she says often the challenge is the hummus, oh, hummus is boring or bland, or I don't like chickpeas. So if that's the challenge, where would they be if they were happy? What if their challenge was overcome? They were in less pain. What does that happy look like? So we banish the boring from your hummus. It's one of their taglines. But basically, in a happy place, you'd be able to enjoy hummus that's made from healthy local ingredients that your guests will enjoy, and it makes you do a happy dance. You want to always couple those two together. You don't go from a challenge to your solution. You go from a challenge to what would it be like if you didn't have that challenge, and then you come in with your solution. So I'm going to go back to the problem and think about if Mary was talking to a retailer. Oh, I have a disclaimer to make. I had a half-hour conversation with Mary, asked her a lot of these pitch questions. This is not a pitch that she has done. This is the information she shared that would make a great pitch. And she knows I'm doing this. So a challenge for a retailer is going to be really different. So you're going to want to look at what is their challenge? Stocking attractive products, having local products that speak to a variety of customers, and they want to reflect the values of their business. Co-op, for instance, has a real value of stocking local. Vita Health has a real value of health. So if that's their challenge, where would they be if the problem was solved? They've got a local product on the shelf that tastes fresh, is consistently delivered, it's safe, and it's got great values behind it. Healthy, local, and available. Now you're setting up for your bright idea. So this is where you can bring in some of the values that you've unearthed by doing the why, how, and the what, or looking at those moments where you are in exactly the place you should be, where you're solving a problem that no one else can solve. You want to be thinking about the features and benefits of what you have to offer. Include a bit about how you work. And I call this the boat to get your audience from that island of sad to the island of happy. So here are a couple of things that if Mary was doing a pitch, she might include at this point. Of course, Happy Dance hummus is made of real vegetables and it's produced locally. She would also emphasize she's been in business for 9 years. And she might mention this quick story. She got her first break at Winnipeg's Third and Bird event, and it was a connection that she said changed her life. Here's her talking. They invested trust in us because we were an unknown and we made hummus, which is pretty unorthodox for Third and Bird. I was thinking that they'd want 1,200 units, but then they told me 3,000. It was just me and 3 food processors in my kitchen, but I made it and then filled the containers by hand, all 3,000, and almost sold out. That's a great story about how she works and her determination. She might emphasize that it's still the joy of coming up with a brand new product that drives her, that she loves the rush of knowing that people love the product. And they just came out with a brand new flavor with fresh dill. She would definitely talk about features and benefits, like the fact that their company is NSF certified. So that means you're not a walking liability. And also she would mention that they've upgraded their equipment. And then she'd move to their vision. So besides that dill, they just developed a new product. It's called faba, and it's upcycled brine. So it's the wastewater from the cooked chickpeas, which is pretty crazy, huh? And it's an egg alternative, an egg replacer, works for vegan people. Great to have in your cupboard. It's the whole circularity thing that is a buzzword right now, though. So she's emphasizing that she's upcycling her waste stream and that she wants to expand into Western Canada and hopefully down the Midwest of the US. So she's showing that they're well positioned. Again, she'd be talking to a retailer at this point. After that, And really, I'm going high level here. You could take a lot more time with all of these. After that, now is your chance to give an invitation for your audience and get really specific. I mean, in this case, she might ask whether they're willing to stock her new product. Consider that. Or even whether the store manager she's talking to or the sales rep could introduce her to another sales rep in the next province. So that small step, when you're doing a pitch, and especially when you're first starting to do pitch, think about what is the next step in order to continue the relationship. So you don't have to get them to invest $1 million, but you might want to ask people, an investor, whether they're willing to book another longer meeting and for you to bring in your business partner. So every step of the way, it's about relationship. So you can use this essential pitch elements worksheet to put it all together, whether that's in a formal pitch or whether that's down to a one-on-one. Once you know these elements, it's pretty interesting to begin to listen for, and you can learn a lot by how other people use it. Yes, you can go on to Dragon's Den and see what kind of pitch structure they're using, and you'll be able to pick out a lot of these elements. But you can also look, for instance, on people's website and see how they're using these pitch elements to draw people in, and eventually, yes, to make sales. A really good example is how Amy from Adagio Acres talks about the grain CSA. She uses every element in this pitch. And so you could go and just Google grain CSA Adagio Acres and read her page, and you'll see that she's taken all these pitch elements. So again, it's a good reminder that yes, pitching in person is important, especially that having the elevator pitch in your back pocket is really important for that. But you can also use all these elements in other ways in your business. So tips for pitching. I'm going to go back to offer up something about you and what motivates you. Don't forget that people trust a person, not a company first. And as the face of the company, you need to be there. It's interesting because although Mary has expanded now with her hummus business and they're in a lot of retailers, I assumed she no longer did smaller markets. And she said, yes, she does smaller markets. She also does sampling in the bigger stores. And she's still the one who goes, even though she has employees she could send, because she's the face of the business. And she said it's still a lot of word of mouth that gets people to buy. So something to consider. So as she's doing it, she's offering up something about who she is and certainly her delight in sharing her product. Demonstrate the unique value and viability of your product with specific examples. So go back to your how you do things. Ask other people what they find unique about your product, why they buy it. That's great intel and endorsements. And then you can go back to that idea of take me to a time and place. Think about moments where you've seen the value of your product and the viability of it. Be flexible about your content. I know some of you might be doing a pitch where you're going to be speaking for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. And that might be fairly set, but most of the time, like I said, it's more of a conversation. So listen for interest. Listen for curiosity. Ask them whether they have more questions. So be willing to go down deeper into content, but gauge that interest first. Be clear about where your company's at and where you're going. Kind of like Mary's example about where they're at in terms of all their safety, their ability to produce, and where you want to go next. So it shows that you have a vision. Those are just a few. I don't even know whether I have a fifth. I think that's it. I have a fifth. And know the basics about the organization business that your audience represents, particularly for those of you who are going into wanting to pitch to retail, knowing as much as you can about that organization. So do your Google research, talk to other people who might have experience with that retailer know the basics. So you don't want to assume their challenge. And you may need to do deeper research to figure out what their challenge is. Or you can, in a one-on-one meeting, it's perfectly fine to say, what challenges are you having right now with products on your shelf? And be ready to respond. Okay, that's about as formal of a pitch as we're going to get into. Because mostly, it's what's most important is making those crucial connections. It's one of my favorite quotes. This is from actually an activist, somebody who was working for social change, the late Grace Lee Boggs. It's never a question of critical mass. It's always about critical connections. So again, you may not be doing a formal pitch, but what are those critical connections that make a difference in your business? I asked each of the women that I talked to what some of their critical connections were. For Amy at Adagio Acres, the connections with other farmers actually makes her work possible. She called a lot of farmers around this whole researching for the mill. And then when she built the mill, she called them back to get their collaboration at the buy-in. And that's really how she started her CSA, her grain CSA, which is one of her absolute unique sales propositions. For Mary, for Katie, she said one of the most crucial connections is with other local farm producers. They drive to markets together, they support each other and exchange information. So just want you to think wider than customers and retailers, that there are a lot of connections that make business possible. And for Mary, here's what she says. Pitches are great, but I don't think they're the biggest deal. She really believes strongly that connecting and networking and making sure those bonds are built, that's the scaffolding to build on. So she said without those connections, she probably would have quit a long time ago. Mary said the very first person was a woman from Food and Beverage Association who bugged her for about 3 years. And then she finally joined and got a lot of support there, a crucial connection. The second was a business development specialist from Manitoba Ag, and who sat her down and taught her everything she needed to know about the cost of goods. For me, one of my first crucial connections was with my business advisor at WeMB, but also what is really important are my colleagues who cheer me on and are willing to be my sounding board. So a couple of tips around making crucial connections. I would suggest taking some of these skills, using the workbook, using that pitch guide, and this will be recorded and coming back to this to review. Start practicing with trusted friends and colleagues. It's the same with negotiation skills, with building your brand, with working with retailers. All of it takes practice. I always start low stakes. So practicing with trusted friends and colleagues on how to make those connections. Seek out 1 or 2 new places to make new connections. And maybe that's going to be the Food and Beverage Association, a business breakfast, a community event in your community, a Chamber of Commerce event. Come in with a goal, but be open to surprise. And literally, your goal might be to make 1 or 2 new connections when you're there. Another thing I often say is look for the friendly face and start there first. And then grow through reciprocity. One of the other things that Mary mentioned among her pieces of advice is when you're at farmers markets, for instance, to reach out to other retailers, not retailers, to other farmers, to other producers. Katie mentioned this as well. Learn from each other and find those people who know a little more than you and are willing to give back. And then at some point, you are going to be the one that can give back to them. So I want to thank Mary McLean, owner of Happy Dance Hummus, Katie McInnes from Dogs Run Farm, and Amy Nickel from Adagio Acre for taking the time to talk to me about their food and their farm businesses. even when they were very busy with harvest and supplying turkeys and getting hummus on the shelf. And to Egg Manitoba and to WeMB for inviting me here. And now an exciting part for me, because you know I love to connect. I'd love to hear some of your questions.
Okay. So the first question I have here is, do you have any advice for a more formal business pitch? For example, pitching a food product to retailer?
Okay, so I did give the example of Mary and how she pitched to the retailer. And one of the pieces of advice I would have is be ready to pitch on Zoom. There's a really good chance with the larger retailers, the person you're pitching to may not be here in Manitoba, and you may not be doing that in person. So my advice in that case is to, again, practice with a trusted colleague first. Have all those pitch elements ready, but also be ready to be curious and ask questions of them about what they're looking for.
Okay, so that goes into pitching on Zoom. Do you have any other advice? I mean, because it can be a little bit difficult making that connection virtually to make that
Yes.
a little easier.
Yeah. A couple of things. Some really basics about being comfortable where you are. So before we started this session, I tried standing and delivering this session. This was when we were doing our tech rehearsal. I tried sitting down. I definitely practiced going back and forth with my slides. And so taking that time to practice, and I decided I was most comfortable sitting down. So think about that, what you're most comfortable with for Zoom. With Zoom, it's great. You can have notes. I actually work still from paper notes. You probably saw me glancing down at that, and that's totally fine. It's totally fine. Um, yeah, I have a little sticky note beside my computer. It says breathe, be grateful, and know it's not the gloss, but the glow. So I write myself little encouraging messages for when I take part in something on Zoom, just so I can stay present. And my final one is start with a smaller retailer and go bigger, so that you have that chance to get settled in those skills.
Great. Another one here. When you do a pitch on Zoom or in person, do you suggest having a PowerPoint type presentation or just a conversation?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends on context. I would think about pitching or making that connection starts with the initial email that you might send requesting a meeting. So think right from there, you're building a relationship. I would not be pulling out the PowerPoint until I get to a request that asks me for, can you give us a 10-minute presentation about your business? Absolutely, I would do PowerPoint, but not rely too heavily on it. Use it for real specifics like stats, like pictures of the product, but don't read off of it. I know it's difficult, and I found myself even reading off of it now because it's in front of me, not behind me, like it often is when I'm presenting in person. So there's a lot of good guidelines online about how much information to include in slides. I would check that out. And don't have too many slides. And remember that you're still a person speaking to a person. The slides do not lead.
Great. Um, do you have any more advice for how to network and sell myself when I really hate it?
Mm. I'm an extrovert, and sometimes it's hard for me to do that. I think a couple of things. Number one, think back to that networking and a lot of pitching is about building relationships. So think about how you build relationships. That includes being interested in what somebody else is doing, for instance. So be relational at networking events. And don't forget to ask people what they do. And in fact, one of the great ways to start and get warmed up is to introduce yourself and say, I'm really curious, what brought you to this event? It's a great opening question that doesn't necessarily say, what do you do? It allows you to hear from somebody else first and take a cue from them about how much they might be willing to listen to what you have to share. Um, and then use those moments when you go, this is exactly why I'm in this business. Collect those, review a couple before you walk into a networking room. And just know that even for extroverts, it can be a lot of work to network. Think about making 1, 2, maybe 3 connections in the room and going, that's great for this time around.
That's great. I have another one that's along those lines. I'm a reserved person and not a big personality like Mary. What tips do you have for me when telling my story or selling myself?
Mm. Um, I would think for this reserved person, it's a great question. Thank you for that. At the beginning, I talked about using these elements and using some of these tips in a way that feels comfortable for you. So often reserved people and introverts are really, really great listeners. And that's so welcome at different events. And it's also a great way to start a relationship. So I would say as a reserved person, asking them first about what brought them to the event or what they're working on right now, and being a good listener is a great way to start. And then also that you don't have to sell yourself or say everything at once. So maybe have a few things ready that talks about, and think about what gets you really excited about your business, and maybe have one small story or one anecdote that you could share in that regard. And again, especially for a reserved person, test it out first with somebody you trust. I always say, like, if I tested everything out with my mom, she'd just say it'd be great. So I always say a trusted colleague, so someone who's going to also be honest with, like, nah, you should try that again, or you could maybe feel a little more comfortable. But definitely consider practicing.
Wonderful. That is all that I have here so far. If anybody has any other questions, you can just type them into the Q&A there at the bottom of the Zoom screen. I did really love that working from the why. That was really good. Probably my biggest takeaway here.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And like I said, I still use that. And it's interesting how I've been through a lot of different careers. I always say I'm a serial careerist. I'm on my 4th, and I'm thinking that's the last one. But often the why, what drives you, doesn't really change that much. What changes is how you demonstrate that out in the world, like you have a different business or a different job. Um, and so it's a really great anchor to start with that question, why, and then to really dig into that how is what you're going to need to grow your business.
Okay, there's one more that's come in here for a question. When pitching to a retailer, should the focus be on my product, me, or both?
Definitely both. Some of that, some of the stuff around, I know people are like, I don't want to focus on me. It's not about me. It's about my business. But remember, all the research says this as well, is people trust other people. It's why, for instance, a lot of sales are word of mouth, because if I like a product and I tell my friend, they're going to buy it, right? So in the same way, as the face of your business, you need to reveal a little of yourself. It doesn't have to be a lot. Really, when you think of what I revealed about Mary during that pitch, unless you knew Mary more before that, I didn't really reveal a lot, and yet you understood that she had a real delight and drive in what she was doing. She had a passion for what she's doing. So think about one small anecdote about how you got into business or why you keep doing it. That would be one way to naturally bring something in about you and it should be linked to your business. I would you can start with your product first. Okay, there's no rules on that one. But I would also, again, link it back to why you are the one producing that product, what problem that you saw that needed to be solved, or what you get out of creating something new that could solve someone else's problem. So using that solving problem language is a really good way of connecting both you and your product.
Wonderful. I don't have any more questions in the Q&A. Maybe invite Annette back on.
Thank you for an excellent presentation, Cate. What a great conclusion to our Essential Skills to Build Your Business series. I love that you used a few of Manitoba Agriculture's clients. Just a reminder that this series was brought to you by Manitoba Agriculture's Value Added Branch and WeMB. And these webinars have been recorded, so you will be able to revisit the content. They will be available to you on the Manitoba Agriculture YouTube channel. We will be sending out an evaluation form today for the entire series. And we really value and appreciate your feedback. And we do use this information to plan future events. So please do fill it out and send it back to us. And you can feel free to connect with the Value Added Branch of Manitoba Agriculture anytime by simply emailing mbagrofood@gov.mb.ca to get connected to a business development specialist. Thank you all for your participation, and good luck to those of you who will be putting their pitching skills to work at our November 5th pitch event.
Yes.
Thanks again.
Best of luck. Yes.